And today, Syria has broken a deal with North Korea and their chemical weapons. North Korea has sent chemical weapons to Syria, and this is not their first trade in armament. As we can easily tell, Syria, in a constant conflict and constant war of violence, they constantly need to feed themselves weapons and ammunition, and Korea is doing just that. The relations with Syria, or the Middle East in general, is very bad, as in the past decade it's been growing worse. Ever since ISIS came up, and ISIS, with Turkey not fighting ISIS, only the Kurds, America supplying the Kurdish forces, the Peshmerga, have recently just been fighting Turkish forces, and now Turkey's getting pissed off at America. And our relations with North Korea have never been good. Let's be real here. We've never been friends ever since. And with it, the advent of armament between North Korea and Syria makes their relationship grow, as with most foreign affairs today. So, all in all, I would dare say that this conflict is going to get worse as time goes on. So, the background on this whole ordeal is the Syrian civil war and the Iraq war that we started, and how it's just constantly feeding more and more conflict and money and overall death in the Middle East. And the conflict of North Korea constantly supplying them. They're in a constant war. They need munitions. They have to have munitions. And also, with, like I stated earlier, Turkey and the fighting with the Kurdish forces, the Peshmerga, and overall just the Kurdish population fighting against them, because we supplied the Kurdish people with weapons. So it's kind of a simulation of what we did with the Russians in the Middle East back in the day. How we gave them weapons, and now they're just fighting our allies, and now they're going to fight us eventually. But the overall gist of the background and how it just all ties in is that we started this, and it's going to get worse, or it'll boil down and pop up again. Anything happening in the Middle East, that has been happening over and over and over again. And to be quite fair, we can't do anything about it. And the whole importance, or I guess you could say relevance, to tie it all up, is that the idea with North Korea and Syria, one of the more heavy nations with, I guess, evil or very negative backgrounds tying together, could lead to a small coalition of sorts. And because of that coalition, it could tie them together. And with the constant idea of two of them uniting in a positive manner in relationship with their constant trade, and America being America, we're left in the dirt, can't do anything. Our relations with North Korea have never improved. Our relations with Syria, or the Middle East in general, have been very rigid at best. But there's also the idea of chemical weapons. Chemical weapons have been outlawed and banned by every nation because of its global effect. It has affected civilians, military, and overall children and populace, no matter disregard of location. Chemical weapons have been outlawed by the globally, because of the fact that it has asphyxiating properties that cause massive damage and suffering to the individual before it even brings death. And we have ruled that anything that causes unnecessary suffering is considered just outright cruel and inhumane. Now, this is also important because I did talk about the relationship, and the relationship is very, very prominent, because North Korea has sent nuclear scientists in their development program for, obviously, nuclear weapons. And Syria has been doing this for a long time. They've been working in nuclear weapons. And their recent prime minister or leader has struck negotiations with the U.S., I can stop making nuclear arms, of all that sort. But here's the main gist. There have been cited North Korean scientists in Syria. And because of that, North Korea supposedly has had an extensive use of their nuclear research and development, picking up the crumbs, rehashing all the information, putting it back together. And that could explain their nuclear development over the past 2 years, as it has skyrocketed to an immense proportion. So it is not far-fetched to think that the nuclear arms development program that they both share is tied together. And if the Syrian leader wants to strike a deal with the U.S., we won't do it. They could just go to North Korea and be like, "What's up? how's it going? Is it good? How's the megaton? How is it going? What's the payload of it? And there's really just no trade-off, because North Korea can do what they want as they're an isolationist country. They do what they want, and to be fair, we can't do anything about it. So the overall impact of this whole event and just the relationship and I guess idea of North Korea and their nuclear arms development in Syria is that it's gonna have the world look at both countries and guess what they're going to do and see how it'll affect them. Just thinking about the idea of using chemical weapons on civilians, as I failed to mention earlier, but there have been constant use of chemical weapons by the Syrian government, which they do not claim they have used against civilians in populous heavy areas. But there have been physical proofs by doctors here, and of course the children themselves and adults that are in constant conflict and have seen symptoms of the constant chemical warfare and just problems. Now, keep in mind that the overall idea of just the relationship growing between the two is just going to constantly bicker at us, and it's going to sneer at us until we can actually think about what we're going to do about the two, I guess not evil powers, but just the overall negative powers that they have. They're I guess you could say one of the more negative karma type of countries, and it's definitely showing as with their constant conflict and isolations. Now, keep in mind that just keep in mind that chemical weapons should not be used against anyone. Even the military have issued that they will never use chemical weapons because of its constant suffering before it brings death to the individual. So just keep that in mind. And the big picture, tying this all in, is that it's going to affect us, because chemical weapons don't necessarily need to be put down in a specific area, because since most of them are airborne, they're uncontrollable. Man can't control how air goes. It can go that way, it can go that way, east, west, north, south, doesn't matter. But the thing about it is, because it's driven airborne sometimes, it can affect other neighboring countries to tie into the conflict and overall constant war in the Middle East. And that will always just be a constant feeding ground of death and ammunition and just a constant mayhem and, I guess in a way, anarchy. And keep in mind that two of probably the biggest countries out there, China and Russia, although not tied down directly to the Middle East, but are neighboring with the Middle East, causes major concerns. Because if a little gust of wind just bursts over and somehow a certain amount of people or a certain amount of government officials are affected by it, Russia probably will just stop and drop the hammer on them. If anything, China will probably move in as well, as they're not best friends, but they have a common enemy. And when somebody has a common enemy, they usually stomp down a lot harder, as we've seen in World War II and just other conflicts in our society, just countries. My opinion on this topic is that right now we are in a very, very tough time. Syria, obviously, constant warfare ever since like the late 20th century, and like the Iraq War, Kurdish conflict, Turkey, Syrian civil war, Iraq, Iran, just overall feeding ground of death, ammunition, bullets, gunfire, anarchy, loss of life, loss of necessary and unnecessary life, but also just a constant, I guess you could say, constant greed of money, and for people that just want to make a buck off of guns, weapons, and ammunition. So I feel that foreign intervention is a must. There should be foreign intervention. And I personally believe it should happen to as much extent as it has in the past with other times when the Cold War was at its peak, and during like the Vietnam War and the Korean War, and how we took physical foreign intervention and helped those nations. The problem with this one is that we really have no one to help. And no one's really there on our side. We're basically against a bunch of countries or a bunch of insurgents, and we have no one there. I mean, I guess Israel counts, but Israel's defensive. They're not going to attack another nation. they're holding their ground. And to be quite fair, it's quite astounding. And overall, I just feel that, like most things that happen in the Middle East, like with ISIS, it gains a lot of popularity, a lot of trend. It's gonna boil down, and it's gonna pop up again, and boil down, and then pop up again. As everything that happens in the Middle East has been doing that ever since the 21st century. Goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. Oh no, a bomb attacked. Oh boy. And then another one comes. Oh boy. It dies down. Oh, another bomb. Oh, people got shot again. It's gonna keep popping up over and over and over. And we're not gonna do anything about it. We can't. We already spent so much money in there. Are we gonna dump more money? I don't know. But that's just my opinion. It could be different from you. It could be different from all of us. So.
Hi, welcome back. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Drake. Thank you for that story, Justin. It was absolutely riveting.
Scary stuff happening over there.
Indeed. It's very sad. I personally think Erdogan is a terrorist and should be put up for his crimes, preferably execution.
The Middle East is screwed up.
Unfortunately, it is. If it weren't for American involvement, much of the problems happening over there wouldn't have been happening today. I definitely think Turkey should be kicked out of NATO for their war crimes.
Well, last week, Trump passed tariffs. These tariffs impose stiff and sweeping new tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. Trump put a flexible plan on America's closest allies, such as Canada and Mexico, and left a possibility for excluding countries such as Australia.
So Donald Trump has been very America first. His rhetoric and his speeches and his actions have always been America first. So to foresee these promises, he enacted a large steel and aluminum tariff that applies globally. So not only, will Europe or China or Russia be hit, but the entire world was impacted by this tariff. Many different companies called out against it, saying that most of their aluminum was imported, such as Coors Light and other large companies that manufacture soda. However, Trump faced extreme backlash, and so now he extended this agreement to Canada and Mexico, which is exempt from the tariff because of the large backlash he was getting from not only politicians, but companies as well.
The relevance of this tariff is that it affects many of our closest allies in our relationship with those allies. So we can, especially with Canada and Mexico, there could be a lot of trade wars that can come out of this. And the foreign leaders warned Trump of a trade war, and it could escalate really quickly, and it could aim at American goods.
Now, my personal opinion on this is I do agree with the tariff, and I do agree with imposing tariffs on imported goods. However, when you do it to the magnitude that he did it, and on all the allies that we have, I do think that it's ludicrous. You can't tax all of our allies from Europe to Canada, Mexico, and expect only American steel mills, which only employ about 470,000 people, to produce enough for millions and millions of jobs that put together, cams, cars, and stuff like that. So I do think the tariffs are good. I don't think we should impose them on our allies, and I don't think they should be taxed as high as they are currently.
I agree with Drake. I feel like it would give us a bad rep as is, and it would hurt our relationships with our allies, and it would be more expensive for our consumers here in the United States.
Okay, so as of lately, there has been a recent news article of a salmonella outbreak related to chicken salads. This outbreak started back in last January, continuing up to March approximately, and apparently 170 people were infected out of 7 states: Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, South Dakota, and North Carolina. Now, the chicken salad outbreak has been called back. Most of the chicken salad in America has been called back by the CDC. It has been called back from January 2nd to February the 7th. Now, these chicken salads were originally made by Specialty Triple T Meats. Now, approximately there has been a bit of a talk going on about the sanitation conditions in contrast to contamination. The CDC recommends that you check all the expiration dates on all the chicken salads, as possible. And at the same time, whenever you're going to throw away a chicken salad, you want to make sure that it is wrapped up tight and secure. You don't want no animals and no other individuals to touch this, as they can get the infection and possibly lead to a much more devastating situation. Now, this can be treated with antibiotics. However, the disease is not that deadly, so you can just go to the hospital and get it treated, no problem. Or if you have a compromised immune system, then you have a problem. A little bit background about this particular type of bacteria. It's mostly a subspecies of Salmonella enterica. It's an aerobic one, it's gram-negative, and it's also rod-shaped. Now, it's mostly transferred to humans through uncooked eggs, mostly undercooked meats and that sorts of stuff, and also through bird droppings. It can cause gastroenteritis. It can lead to vomiting, fever, and abdominal pain. However, it has a special outer coating shielded by a lipid protein sheath. Now, what this sheath does is that this is the toxic part of the bacteria. It protects it from the environment and all other sources of things. Salmonella has caused at least 17 million worldwide cases, and approximately there are two types. You have the Salmonella typhi and Salmonella frere. Normally, these are used to make new vaccines, but they have to be handled with extreme care. The relevance in this is that this can reduce the cost of an epidemic or a pandemic in a state or community. It can decrease the mortality rate. It can decrease the death rate. However, though, it kind of informs the public that they need to check their frozen foods and whatever that is stored as in fresh, they need to check the expiration date to ensure that it's not overdue. It also made us aware that health is a really significant factor that plays into our lives as a whole, that enables our well-being, it enables our mindset and our focus, and what it does is that it helps us to perform our everyday activities. The CDC and the WHO have also, this relates to them because it makes them put tighter restrictions on certain types of foods now, especially frozen foods, and it helps them in more identifying the pathogens that are causing this and leading them to more research in this particular area. It also enables doctors to be well prepared and prepared ahead of time in order to what to expect. The impact of this is that safety is mostly a health concern, because you always want to be secure in terms of your body, anatomy, and the physiology. You don't want to be, exposed to any viral agents or anything. The warmth, however, will increase this pathogen. So do not store any of those chicken salads or any frozen foods in a warm area, as salmonella could spread from this. However, this kind of plays into the economy a bit, because the economy and the infrastructure, if there was an epidemic or a pandemic and all workers causes this, it could lead to a plunging down in the economy. The work industry could be closed down, and all the major industries that made this country, run and everything, it could be devastated. That's why this is a serious concern. It can lead to an evolved version of a superinfection, which is defined as an infection that is mostly resistant to all types of antibiotics. However, multiple strains can be detected from this, and most of them can be antibiotic resistant. And this is really dangerous because in order for this to occur, they have to be neutralized with a bunch of different antibiotics. In my opinion, I feel that this is a really, really touchy issue, because since our health is of the utmost concern, it plays a part into everything. It plays a part into the economy. It plays a part into what we do every day, and it plays a part into our well awareness. If by some means we contract any of these here symptoms, let's just say that it can lead to a decrease in focus, a decrease in your ability to work, and the decrease in the ability to function very well. And I think that overall, it's a systematic illness that will potentially kill you if it's not treated.
So today in Temecula, a man, 59-year-old Robert Scott Utley, was arrested, and the sheriff department was assaulting the household because Robert was allegedly taking a family hostage. And The sheriff department broke negotiations with him, or attempted to at least, and he adamantly refused that. And as he refused, the assault began on the household, and the officer shot him a couple of times. And in non-lethal areas, no one was hurt except for the perpetrator, and that's what happened.
Well, a little background on this is that Scott Utley was basically a 59-year-old man from Fontana. He holds two positions in the Fulfillment Corporation as a senior salesman and as an accountant executive. However, though, he was arrested due to the recent events, and his bail is at $200,000, and he's currently being held in the Marietta Southwest facility. So, Justin, what do you think about this guy? Why do you think he had such intentions?
I just feel like the man is a little too arrogant for his own individualism. He's obviously he's very powerful. He has gained his position by any means. How, I don't know how. We don't have enough information on his past, but we do know for sure that he is throwing his power away, not to the good intentions of others, but basically to either show his own power or to reveal his, I guess, prominence to other people that are not as favorable.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. But in terms of the charges that are being executed on this man, noting that he just came out of prison and he's being indicted back in prison on a couple of counts of false imprisonment and assault charges. What do you think about that situation?
I personally feel that this man has had a lot of tries. I feel like money is a punishment, but it's not a direct punishment that hits at the core of people. Because, like I said earlier and stated, that this man has a prominent position. He's constantly feeding money into himself, into his own wallet. He's constantly revealing his power, flailing his money as he's like smacking people with it, essentially, as he did with the hostages, essentially. And it's not a full time solution. It's not. And they should have like a certain tier, like with detentions and stuff like that at school, where it goes higher and higher, and it's not just physical money. It's more of like mental and physical treatment or like punishment of the said individual. Call it cruel, but he's been doing this over and over and over, and he deserves to like at least receive some heavy hand on this.
No, that's true because Scott Utley has more than 10 charges, and he also has a alcohol DUI, about 2 of those. And I would say that does this event that occurred in Temecula just like randomly out of nowhere, like a rich person like this, I feel as if like the society is being is unsafe. There's not much. I would say society kind of lacks security in like these positions for a man to just storm into a house and hold a family hostage without anything being said about it. Because as I saw, there was no patrol cars around the area, and I just felt it was a extreme vulnerability for society to make this kind of thing happen. I mean, what about you?
I feel that I wouldn't say it's directly society's fault, but it is in all respects mostly the way we forged our society. It would be wrong of us to simply say that it's society's fault. We forged society, so indirectly it is our own fault. To simply blame it on something that we created and not say it's our fault as well is simply just hypocritical. It doesn't make sense. But in all respect, it is part of society's fault, and the way we shape it today is causing that problem and stir. And with a lot of people, like government scandals and constant struggle, people going back and forth, complaining everywhere, it's going to keep growing. But in the end, it will eventually either attempt to get solved and fixed, or at least put a new implementation into it.
I also feel like it's kind of like an indulgence. Like I feel like people like psychologically, like if they've taken a keen interest in like personal needs and like desires. Like I'm thinking psychologically, maybe I might be wrong, but I'm just saying I don't know why a rich man like he would do this.
I think the one thing that people in the higher echelon of society think is that they have this power and they can't use it, so they flaunt it around. And to be quite fair, I feel like anybody that has that mentality they can't escape it. It's human nature to like show power and stuff like that. So to simply say like, oh, he's another human being, he'll do just fine. It's not like that. It's in human nature to do that kind of stuff. it's easily in our blood to just flaunt power and reveal it and show who's the bigger dog, essentially. Um, it's very, very, and all humans, to be fair, are quite arrogant to respect. In certain areas, like let's say you're watching entertainment where you're like, you know this story about this certain character,
Right.
and you just flaunt over and you're like, oh, I know this, and then like you guys just talk about it, but you have so much more knowledge, you have so much more backing, so you kind of like reveal that self to the other person, so you just have so much more information.
Well, I would have to agree with you on all those points. I would not. I would just like to say that you know, it just proves that society is really vulnerable, and we don't know. It's kind of like an unexpected event. That's gonna occur. We don't know what's gonna happen today or tomorrow. So whatever society, whatever's going on in society is really unexpected. And yeah, I think that it's really something to be concerned about.
Yeah, I feel that something to be concerned about is something that will be noted, but I feel because of our current situation and society that we've built up upon after all these years, we've built into a very, very multiplistic society where we talk about it, we attempt to solve a problem, but we do not initiate the plan, if that makes sense. We attempt to curve the plan or forge the bond to help initiate the fixing, but in all respects, all we're doing is just delaying the problem or just trying to put it off for another time and eventually shelve it. So I want to ask you a very interesting question. If you could solve this problem, just name one thing that would help solve the problem of the upper echelon and how it would just, I guess, fix arrogance would be one. How would you solve that? Just one thing.
Well, in regards to knowing he's a guy that is rich, he's up there. I personally, I mean, I don't know if it's right to say what I'm saying right now, but what I'm saying is that because he's all rich and mighty, he has a particular type of mindset that anything that he wants to do, that he can get away from it because he has an enormous amount of money. Like he can just immediately get bailed out like that, and then he can resort back to whatever he wants to do because the upper class. When you think of upper class, you think of riches and wealth, but like you not only think of that, but you think of the manipulation and you think of the exploitation that really goes on. Compared to the middle and the lower class where we're trying to keep everything at a midline stable. Yeah.
Stabilized. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'd say I agree with you on that point.
Yeah. So I'm here with Raquel, and have you heard about the shooting in Murrieta?
Yes.
What do you think of inmates committing a crime, they're being released, but they're getting sent back? Like, what's your whole take on that?
I definitely think there should be some sort of system put in place where they follow up, especially with inmates where it's that they're going to be sent back. That they're probably the kind of person who's going to commit another crime. There needs to be something where you actually not take care of them, but get them the help they need to make sure that they don't continue to be that same person and that they do make some sort of change to their lifestyle.
So you had one question. What would it be for police force?
What are they doing to make things better? Because I feel like it's just this endless cycle of them going back to jail, going like you were saying. So I feel like they need to be doing something to follow up with these inmates and making sure that they are changing their lifestyle for the better.
Okay, thank you, Raquel. Mr. Rieger, the Temesco Canyon high school art teacher. And Mr. Rieger, have you heard about the shooting in Murrieta?
Very, very lightly, yes.
So I have two questions I want to ask you. What do you think about inmates being released from prison? They're going to commit another crime, and then they're being sent back. What's your take on that?
Well, I would hope that the justice system has, a successful method for somehow determining who would be a repeat offender.
Mm-hmm.
Statistics, something like that would bear that out, so to keep the public safe.
Okay. My last question would be, what question would you direct towards the police force in order to create a more secure environment?
I guess would be along that line, at what point is a person's mental stability considered in their release? Mm-hmm. Not just what was the crime committed prior to that, but what's the likelihood of repeat offender continuing.
Right.
That kind of thing. I think that should be a little bit of the evaluation too, or maybe part of the penalty phase. That
Right.
perhaps rather than just sending a person to prison to punish them for the crime, actually look into what would be successful rehabilitation for the criminal or for the person.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rieger.
You're welcome. Thank you.
In entertainment news, 19-year-old Benjamin Glaze auditioned for American Idol, and before he began his audition in front of the judges, including Katy Perry, she surprisingly gave him a kiss on the lips. The plot twist is that he actually was very uncomfortable with it and sad, since he's been saving his first kiss for his first relationship. In weird romantic news, a long-term couple planned and had their wedding at a grocery store called Whole Foods, which is actually pretty romantic, I'd say, because that's where they first met and fell in love.